All right, liked.
Okay. Well, let's get started. We're at 7 o'clock. Welcome to the January 23rd, 2023 Site Plan Review Committee subgroup meeting for ARVA. We will be holding a hybrid public meeting, which enables remote electronic participation as legally authorized by the Code of Virginia per the Planning Commission's electronic meeting policy adopted on July 7th, 2022. Members of the SPRC subgroup for ARVA are participating here both in person and virtually through electronic means. SPRC subgroup members participating virtually include Elizabeth Gallagher, Pedestrian Advisory Committee, and Doris Ray from the Disability Advisory Commission. At this time, I'd like to orient everyone to our hybrid environment and for a few specifics about how tonight's meeting will run. Members of the public may attend the meeting here in person or electronically by using the Microsoft Teams link provided on the SPRC webpage, the project webpage, the county's events calendar, and the email notifications sent to SPRC email subscribers. Additionally, there is a dial-in phone option for those who wish to use it. For our subgroup members joining virtually, if anyone loses internet connectivity during today's meeting, please reconnect with us by phone. Please keep yourself muted until you're called upon. Turn off any sound to any other devices around you to minimize interference. And please turn off your video feed until the discussion portion of the meeting. For our virtual members of the public using Microsoft Teams, please turn off your video feed and mute yourself until public comment if you decide to sign up for that. The Microsoft Teams meeting chat is active to serve two purposes: for SPRC subgroup members who need technical assistance and for members of the public to add their names to the list for public comment, which will be taken at the end of the meeting. The Teams chat should not be used for discussion. Those who are planning to provide public comment will still need to do so at the end of the meeting, as the chat will not serve as that opportunity. All public comments must be shared verbally for the record during the assigned public comment period. If subgroup members participating virtually wish to be recognized to speak on an item during the course of the meeting, please raise your virtual hand in Teams. Staff will monitor the Teams to see if you would like to speak and let us know. If subgroup members are participating via phone today without a hand raise option, I will verbally check in to see if there are members who still want to be recognized, and you can unmute and speak then. For our members of the public who would like to provide feedback and comment, you will be called on to speak at the end of the meeting and will be allotted 2 to 3 minutes to speak on tonight's agenda item. The speaking time allotted will depend on the number of speakers we have this evening. If you wish to speak, please enter your name in the meeting chat for virtual attendees or provide staff with your name if in person, and you will be added to the speakers list. Lastly, this is a public forum. Today's meeting will be recorded and posted on the county website. All information associated with today's meeting, whether written or spoken, is subject to the Freedom of Information Act requirements. So thank you very much. Let's go around the table and do introductions. So we all get to know each other. I'm Tenley Peterson. I am a planning commission member and I am chair of all of the SPRCs for Arlington's projects, but I'm chair of this particular project as well. Yeah.
All right, to my breath, sorry I'm late. I'm Leo Starley. I'm also from the Planning Commission.
James Schroll, Planning Commission.
Chris Ladd from the Transportation Commission. Jim Lantelli, Planning Commission. Matt Roberts with the Herschel Law Firm Project.
Going back there or?
Sure, yeah, let's go with the rest of that.
So L Transportation Commission.
And Patel, thank you for organizing this.
Brian Harris, Because Architecture.
I'm Dan Patel with Grove Site, Transportation Consultant, working with the team.
Reveal Studios Architecture.
Aaron Schutz with the Line Park Civic Association, and I'm also a member of the Bicycle Advisory Commission, so I like bikes.
Kate Donahue, Forestry and National Resources Commission.
Mark David, the Service Fire Department.
Chris Kreider, Urban Design and Planning.
Peter Schultz, the current planning division of the Arlington County Planning Office.
And Adam Rasmussen, representative from the Parks and Recreation Commission.
Pierre Jonker, Associate Manager.
And are there members of the SPRC who are joining us virtually? Can you introduce yourselves, please?
Hi, my name is Lizzie Gallagher from the Pedestrian Advisory Committee.
And do we have Doris? Is that Doris raising her hand?
Yes, Doris Ray, representing the Disability Advisory Commission.
Thank you, Doris. Okay, great. So now I'd like to turn it over to both the staff and applicant for a very short, max 10-minute presentation. I sent around the video presentations and the staff report that they worked on very hard in advance of today's meeting. So I hope you all got a chance to look at those, but in case you need a refresher, we have these two presentations. So why don't I turn it over to Peter to go first, and then we'll go to Ashton Allen from the applicant.
Thank you. I'd just like to familiarize everyone online and here with the project webpage. Probably the easiest way to get there is just go on the arlingtonva.us main webpage and type in 2201 Arlington Boulevard or ARVA, and that'll be your first hit. You'll find all the materials here, including the developer's application materials, as well as the detailed plans and the rezoning application. You'll find summaries of the previous online engagement opportunity we did November 2nd through December 5th. Today is the first live hybrid meeting of the Site Plan Review Committee, and I will just, you can watch my presentation or watch the slides. I will, instead of going through it at detail, just go through the main highlights. Again, the online engagement period happened November 22nd through December 5th, 2022. It had 39 unique commenters. Staff wanted to prompt discussion about things like the historic preservation of the lobby and the sign. Results of that were pretty much equally divided. There were several comments about adding retail to the corner of Pershing and Arlington Drive. Generally, there were no strong feelings on the architectural style of the building. Pretty much everyone would like to see more landscaping on the site and green space. And a lot of comments requesting specifically a water fountain at the corner of Pershing Drive and Arlington Boulevard, and a strong desire for protected bike lanes on both sides of Pershing Drive. Staff's preliminary issues, which will continue to be issues as we work through this process, include parking that's slightly above grade, the transformer location, which the developer might tell you, will show you today a possible solution to that. We suggested also improved landscaping. Actually moving the transformer location might also help with that too. We needed evidence, and the developer will show you today about the existing sign and lobby can't be preserved, but they do hope, will not just hope, but will recreate them in an accurate way. And also, in general, can more be done for sustainability and biophilia, considering that's one of the important goals of the special study that was done last year about this site. Generally, the building form and architecture is consistent with the outcome of that special study, where they move the height to the Arlington Boulevard side, away from the neighborhood and towards the middle of the site, and then tapering down to the surrounding properties. One of the strong recommendations of that special club study was to actually preserve the vintage sign and lobby at the corner of Pershing Drive and Arlington Boulevard. The developer proposes to recreate those issues. They have, and it's posted online, a third-party structural engineer report that actually using the 70-year-old items are just not possible today, but that they will recreate as close as possible using the same size. Staff would still encourage that the developer to perhaps reuse some material if possible, if not the actual structures themselves. With regard to the architecture, another guiding principle for the site was that it either celebrate the mid-century modern of the architecture or fit in with the existing neighboring Washington and Lee apartments, and staff had a couple examples that we had collected of the neighboring, of just some simple detailing with brick, that nothing elaborate need be done, but in order to be more contextual, that as you can see in the corners here and at the cornice line at the roof, just light detailing. The transportation, staff's transportation analysis just went into the existing. The developer is proposing a protected bike lane on this side of Pershing Drive. DES would, support a protected bicycle lane across Pershing Drive in order to have matching bike lanes on both sides. We can work with the developer on that. Be aware, though, that the north side protected bike lane is considered an off-site improvement, so it would be as part of their package of community benefits. The protected bike lane on this side, their side of the project, is just part of the, part of the project, not a community benefit with which they can earn additional densities. The same thing with the, that's all right. I just heard myself coming back. The same thing with the connection here to Arlington Boulevard, and the developer will show you in their presentation that they improved the landscaping and added berming along Arlington Boulevard, more in line with the sector plan recommendation, and will be widening and improving the trail. So the public process is, however, that February 27th date is incorrect. That our next meeting will most likely be March 20th to discuss remaining issues as well as landscaping. Today, the agenda, we think, would focus mostly on architecture and transportation issues. And then, of course, to be determined for commission, the full slate of commission meetings, and then finally the county board. And again, like everybody to, feel free to check the website, which is regularly updated. Thank you.
Let's see, March 23rd.
20th,
20th.
Monday, March 20th.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and now let's turn to Ashton Allen for the applicant presentation. And Ashton, you can introduce yourself. I realize I skipped over you during the introduction phase.
That's all right. Thank you. And apologies, I'm not there in person, but I'm Ashton Allen, Studios Architecture. Matt, did you want to give any high-level overview, or should I jump right in?
Yeah, just real quick, and Ashton, I think you might be a little frozen there. You might want to try your camera on and off just real quick. So good evening, everybody. Matt Roberts with the Hershey Law Firm, as I said earlier. Project team. There we go. Live and in charge. We're really looking forward to having this discussion with everybody and getting this project off the ground. This project, as Peter sort of let you know, is a long time coming and has been in the thought process both for the applicant and the county for quite some time. Before we get started, I do want to say thank you to Aaron and the Lion Park neighborhood for hosting us on several occasions so far to come out, have these discussions pretty early as we were filing and kind of going through the early iterations of the project. Really great to have the community feedback on that. Really have I think, a good positive relationship with Lion Park. So we very much appreciated that. Peter has given you really all the background to kind of bring things up to where we need to be. I think for our presentation tonight in advance of getting into some discussions, I wanted to highlight for you, and Ashton will do this, some of the changes we've made since the initial filing and some things that we wanted to highlight for the next person. So with that, Ashton, please go ahead.
Thanks so much, Matt, and thank you, members of the commission. As an overview, as Matt mentioned, we've had several meetings with Lion Park, as well as the hybrid community input, as Peter had referenced. And through that and staff comments, we've been able to garner a couple key elements that we'd like to present today as propositions to potentially improve the design and respond to some of those comments. So those items are kind of listed at the top of this page. And what I'm going to do is go through a series of renderings very quickly that are before and after, as well as drawings, to show what has changed for context and kind of understanding the reasoning. So the first of these changes that we're going to talk about is the lobby volume, which was a staff comment, and noting that the original lobby and sign, which are unfortunately in a structural condition that isn't really savable in their current form, and their current form has gone through many iterations in the past 80 plus years. But zipping back and forth, the goal, consistent with our study, is to maintain the proportion of that original lobby. So here it was expressed as a two-story, which was continuous with this band around. We think that architecture can be better served and do a better highlight for the sign by lowering that volume. Similarly, we've talked about improving the landscape at the base of the building and berming, kind of building in with the layered landscape approach along Arlington Boulevard. And that really is possible thanks to relocating the transformer vault. Apologies here. So in this plan view, I have vignettes of renderings at the bottom of, this is the transformer vault that's currently designed as a surface vault here at the corner of Arlington Boulevard on the south end of the site. And that's being proposed to be relocated to underground under Pershing Drive, which will allow additional landscape around this end and additional windows at the base of this building. So really allowing a better transition overall in the site and landscaping all around. Flipping around, this is a view across Pershing Drive looking south. Here is the original design with the 2-story volume, and again dropping that to the 1-story architecture, similar to what is in the mass today, and highlighting the retail equivalent space, which is here at the corner. You know, the goal of maintaining the corner lobby expression is something that programmatically made sense to maintain a lobby itself for the building architecture, and we can talk about that a little bit later. This is a view as we've moved down to Wayne Street at the corner of the proposed park easement area, the public use easement, which would be designed as a park. Speaking of that park, in this view, there were questions from staff about a sidewalk in this location that was being planned within the park easement that would provide access to some of the apartments as well as egress paths from the building. In response to that, we're proposing to relocate that sidewalk outside of that proposed park easement zone, removing that area from this portion of the building and putting it back, moving that density back to Arlington Boulevard, still maintaining over a 25-foot setback here and 65-foot setback from the property line. To Peter's point on architectural detailing, we also thought that this was worth mentioning and sharing some images that were a little closer up. Some of these elements of coining are captured and kind of extended within the mid-century or modern spirit by expressing these horizontal soldier courses, which is essentially kind of a scaled up coining at the corners of the architecture, and cornice again by those kind of pulled out soldier courses. And as you come down to the base of the building, some of these details with sets in corners as they transition around were similar to some of the other details that Peter had pulled up, and we can talk about this more later as well. Finally, coming to the Arlington Boulevard Trail, which I believe, as most of you know, is mostly on VDOT controlled land. So there is ongoing conversations with VDOT to ensure that we can provide the types of improvements that that the sector, the GLUP expects. But in this design, there was a lot of hardscape against the base of the building, and again with these stoops and stairs, and by reallocating the sharing stairs, having fewer stairs that actually come down, changing the width of the stoop, and we're able to add landscape and provide a better transition and berm against the architecture, allowing this kind of quintessential neighborhood stoop condition to be continuous and kind of provide an urban edge along that trail. Finally, zooming back across Arlington, again, this transformer vault location, which had produced a dead wall in the back corner, being able to remove that, activate that, turn those back into units, and then provide that transition with the stoop level. We think these are improvements that we think improve the architecture, and we're pleased to be able to show. This is just a drawing that shows this pad transformer above ground. This was the plan below grade, and then as those transformer vaults move to Pershing Drive in Arlington, where there is service, freeing up the south end of the site to allow circulation around, which was another staff comment. So with that, I can turn it over to Dan for a high overview of transportation. Dan, just holler at me to keep moving slides, or I'll move for you.
Slide at the table here.
Just as a time check, you're at 3 minutes left.
Be very high level, very quick.
Evening again, I'm Dan Van Pelt with Grove Slate. Let's quickly go through this. All this is touched on as we go through the slides, so let's just keep going through. Pedestrian facilities. We did a transportation study that looked at all pedestrian facilities around the site. And I think you may have gone, you skipped forward. Oh, actually, you could go back. There you go. So just already talked about how the trail gets upgraded along the eastern frontage of the site, along with all the sidewalks that are around the periphery of the site are upgraded. And it's a very walkable area. We're just trying to enhance that and enhance connectivity with the site. Next slide. Transit facilities, there's 15 bus stops in the vicinity of the site. And there's 5 routes that are served there. We're about 8/10 of a mile to a mile from the metro stations with the overline service. Next slide. Bike facilities, I think we'll talk a little more about those probably this evening, but there's existing bike lanes on Pershing Drive, as already talked about, upgrading on the south side to protect the bike lane. There's the new section of the trail. Slide. Ground floor bike room, which I think is a really nice thing to have. So long-term spaces on the ground floor and then the short-term spaces. Let's go to the next slide, just in interest of time. This shows the protected bike lane along Pershing, and it's been modified a bit to extend the median down the middle of Pershing to restrict the turning movements to right out off of Pershing site drive, and also close up what was there before that's no longer needed as you get closer up to the intersection of Route 50. Next slide. 2 access points. And the Pershing Drive, as we said, we right in, right out. Wayne Street wants to be operated as a left in, right out. So the circulation patterns you see here. There's the internal streets within the site, the shared views on the southern end of the site. And this shows how pickup drop off would work coming in and out of the site. Let's keep going because I have a feeling I'm pretty close to the end of my 3 minutes. If I'm
45 seconds.
Ready? Okay, sorry. All right. So this, we can talk more about this, but this shows pickup drop off, shows location, loading dock, bike room. Next slide, please. And then we did an MMTA. Really, the site volumes are pretty low here. So really mitigations are through good site design and transportation management measures. So we can talk more about those as we go along with the other improvements. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Just under time. You have 10 seconds left. You want to say something?
Oh, okay. I think we pretty well covered it. I'm sure we'll probably go in discussion on some of the other items.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Okay, so as Peter mentioned, tonight the discussion is going to be covering building form and architecture, as well as transportation. So we'll have about 30 minutes of discussion for each one of those topics. And it's for architecture, building form, we're talking about architecture, the location, the amount of retail, neighborhood character, HALRB issues with the lobby and ARVA signage. Staff brought up the evidence that the sign and lobby can't be preserved. They need to see more evidence there. And the above ground transformer, which the applicant has been working on. So I'd like to open up the conversation to the group. If you have a question, or clarifying questions or comments about what you've seen. And if I can ask the folks that are joining us virtually, if they can turn their cameras on so we can kind of welcome you to the discussion. If you have questions or comments, please raise your hand or kind of give us a wave and then we'll know to welcome you. Doris, I know if you have any questions, I see your hands raised right now. Did you want to start us off, Doris? Or was your hand raised residual from before? Okay, I saw you come on and off mute and then back on. So I'll open it up to the room then. Does anyone have
Sorry for the delay.
Okay, Doris, did you want to start?
Yeah, I will. Actually, I think my hand was raised for the last time when I was getting your attention that I hadn't introduced. But but I do have, is this the time that I can ask a question about retail?
Sure, yep.
Yeah. So the first floor of the building itself, the residential. Excuse me for a second. And the retail will need to be fully accessible in accordance not with just ANSI for the housing. I'm sorry, I don't know why that started just now.
Oh, that's, do you want to get some
Yeah,
water?
anyway, what is going to have to be fully accessible with the Americans with Disabilities Act, because any retail is considered a public accommodation. So I'm wondering whether the walkways and paths of travel now there will be reconstructed to be fully accessible with ADA. I know from driving back there, and I pass that building frequently on the bus because I live right up the road, it's older sidewalks and there is some slope there and it's not fully accessible. So I'm wondering what you're going to be doing about that, and is there reconstruction inside the building for the retail and the front doors, because the path of travel will have to be completely compliant with the 2010 ADA accessibility standards.
Thank you, Doris.
And yeah, that was the question.
Okay, thanks, Doris. We'd like
I'm going to turn that over to Alan Beal from Studios.
Field a few of these. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, we will make this project fully accessible as required by code, as required by ADA, ANSI. And the retail in particular is accessible right off the sidewalk. Curb cuts will be accessible. Entries into the retail space will be accessible. It'll be up to the retailer itself to ensure that their facility is accessible. So the answer is an emphatic yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Steph, did you want to add anything as a follow-up to the street? Okay, great. Jim?
Sure, I could jump in. My question falls around the first level of the building, and that's the parking and retail. I guess maybe touch retail first. You mentioned that people want retail on the corner of Hershey and Arlington Boulevard. I'm really concerned about that. I'm not sure there's much pedestrian traffic there. I think the retail, and Aaron can tell me if I'm wrong, but the retail on Hershey seems to be struggling.
Yeah.
I'm not sure adding yet another place in probably the least, with the least pedestrian traffic is a recipe for success. So I think having a lobby there makes a lot of sense. That's just my opinion on that.
Yeah. So I consulted with Margaret, doing the plan, and that we would be happy with a lobby that's transparent and provide some sort of interactivity. So staff is not insisting that space be retail. I was just summarizing some comments that.
But I just wanted to.
But as staff will support the developer's proposal, subject to the required transparency for that site in the study document. So at least that the plaza has some sort of visibility in and out for safety and security purposes. But yes, retail's been tough.
I think retail was doing fine before the pandemic along that strip. Obviously, pandemic changed things. I'm not sure that I'm willing to say for the next 30 years, nobody's going to want to put a restaurant or a coffee shop right there with all that beautiful landscaping that you guys are planning there, with the bike trail right there with, that is an opportunity to have a really nice, I'm just going to say coffee shop, because I would stop there all the time because we don't have a good coffee shop anywhere in Lyon Park area. I get it that it's not as compelling as more rental spaces. And if it has to be subsidized retail, that's not as compelling for the builder, but I think it'd be great to have it. And I'd really like to see more than one little, it's a huge site. One little retail there doesn't seem like enough to me. Across the street, there's 7, 8 things. And yes, they've struggled in the last couple of years, but they were thriving when they went in. And they can thrive again at the right kind of stuff. You look up at Lee Heights up in Arrowine and stuff. So we're in different places, but old stuff can, interesting stuff, the right mix can thrive.
Then parking. Am I looking at that? It looks like the parking is on the first level and some of the parking actually goes right up to the facade. Is that correct? Because if that is correct, I'm really bothered by that. I think that's sort of contrary to everything that we in the county have been pushing, that we don't want parking to be right up against a sidewalk in a building. That should be active space, and parking is not active space. So I have real problems with that, especially on Pershing Drive. It's just wrong as far as I'm concerned. And going beyond that, that sort of hit everything at once. The basic architecture, I don't have any concerns with it. I do wonder, and this is something I defer to Commissioner Sarley, the architect, and actually Mr. Kreider, for design. Wasn't the old ARVA, it was certainly mixed with the modern, is that sort of like the boogie movement type of design? With that blade, that exuberant blade and the glass and everything?
Yeah, and Ashton, they tried to look into that actually and sort of pick up that theme. That an earlier discussion we had with them, there wasn't sort of embrace that. It's kind of, yeah, so it's.
Which is great, because it just strikes me that ARVA was really a different, architecturally very different from the apartment buildings next to it, which seemed to be more designed than this modern good. So I wouldn't require the building to reflect both. I'd still, it's more what it was, the boogie movement is what it should be. I'm not so concerned about it really tying into the apartment buildings next door, which were a very different design aesthetic. And I'm not sure the two that really match together. There was a real break there. I think Art Deco moved into Art Moderne. There's sort of an evolution. But when you got to Googie and Modern, it's like there was a line. They were different. So I don't think the two necessarily need to be matched up. I would definitely defer to HALRP as far as whether to keep it in some form or to just recreate it. But it strikes me that certainly with the glass, if we get to recreate it, the big advantage there is going to be environmentally way better, because glass built 70 years ago was just leaked heat constantly. There was no insulation. So I think on an environmental sustainability viewpoint, replacing the glass with something modern, as long as it looks the same, of course, would be something I'd be strongly in favor of. Again, for environmental purposes.
How do you feel about lowering?
I think that's great. That makes a big difference. I really
Sorry, lowering what?
getting rid of that band at the top and dropping, so it really more reflects what had been there without adding the extra layer on top of it. So I absolutely agree with you that was, I think that was a big.
Are those similar heights now? The current lobby and the new lobby? Because the current lobby is 2-story.
Yeah, I think that was a
Similar
really big.
locations. If you did an overlay, you'd see this very
Yeah.
close.
The new one is only going to be 1-story, but cavernous.
It's big.
No, that was a really good change.
Yeah, no, I like that.
Very good change. So anyway, that sort of sums up what I'm thinking of with this site.
Yeah, did you? want to
Yeah,
add
I'll go
something?
next. I'll piggyback on that. That's my cue. I agree with Commissioner Nolan. Tell me that there's this League California sort of, car 50 sort of quality going that is not being reflected on the architecture. The architecture is elegant, might I add. Thank you for doing a good job. I like the more opaque facets of this. It's good with bird friendly, energy friendly and all that. So, I would encourage you to value engineer the glass a little bit further back if you can swing it. Just for this is the B2C2 territory really that I'm going into. So I think generally speaking, I'm seeing some very positive design moves and I'm really appreciating, I think, and excuse me, I didn't have too much time to prepare for this, but the one thing that jumps out at me, speaking of the googly design or googie design, is the fin and the proportion and the relationship of the historic fin to the mass. And I'm sure you struggled with this. But I'm wondering if there could be a little bit more of a gap between sort of the mats and the fin, or, and I think it's a little bit of what Commissioner Montalvo was touching base on. It's a different nature than what the building's doing. So, I'm a little bit torn, literally, right? One is sort of trying to be funny and happy, and the other one's saying like, oh no, we're a very formal, very, fastidious sort of building. So there's a little bit of a conflict there. And I think the scale of the fin is just completely buried on the mass behind it, so I don't know if a little gap would maybe perhaps you could
That's what I
say
got
that.
to do with gap.
Right, a little gap, so it stands more of a sculptural element on the front, and not so much part of that building, or, a switch of materiality around it. Actually, I take that back. I'll leave it at that. I'll just flag that. I think, I really like the materiality, the dark masonry. I'm assuming it's a brick masonry base with this sort of lighter color top, and then it goes dark again at the recessed penthouse. I think that's a lovely combination. And I think the proportions of the windows of the massing is great, the setbacks and the angles. I was a little curious on the angles on the Route 50 side, if there was any deliberateness on that relative to solar, light, energy, noise, any of those things. I think there might be a little opportunity to give you sort of a little bit of a thinking on that. But I think generally very positive reaction to this. And if I think of anything else, I'll raise my hand, frustrate the chair out of order.
Okay, any reply or response from the applicant?
Should I go ahead, Matt?
Yeah, please.
And I'm not sure which, there were quite a few there, so that's the question. So on the retail side, I will say, I think having some control over that facade, being able to actually design the lobby and make sure it's always sort of what we want it to be. I think there's a lot of value there versus, it's a retail space, it's you're out of, you don't have the same level of control. So I just wanted to kind of say that, because I think we can control that. And then I think we'll talk about parking a little more, so I'm gonna table that one. So just to talk about the Googie architecture, I appreciate the reference. We had a lot of fun looking at Googie architecture and, Googie motels, and the doo-wop was the other term that you hear a lot, like when you think of Wildwood, places like that. I will say that if you do look at the examples of that style of architecture across the board, this is definitely on the right side of Googie. I think we can all agree. I mean, it's, you've got the blade sign, you've got the lobby, but the rest of it is pretty staid compared to what you typically see in that particular style. And in some ways that works out well, and it helps marry with like, the Washington Lee apartments, where there'd be this crazy contrast if that Googie style extended all the way out there. And I think that was part of our intent, was to really focus that feel at the corner, and really try to focus on the sign and the corner expression. And then try to really riff off the mid-century modern kind of moves in terms of, playing up this sort of cool color palette, also playing up the horizontality. The building is inherently horizontal. There's really no way around it. And when we looked at a pure horizontal building, which is often the case with this sort of Googie architecture, it really becomes a little bit it becomes much. And so we thought the stepping there, to answer your question, the stepping was partly to help, increase the views, corner apartments. Also, it does sort of orient itself a little more towards the north, so there's a little less direct, glare. But mainly it was sort of to break up the architecture, because it was a lot of horizontality, and we felt it really needed to scale to be addressed in highway speed also. So I think that sort of was our thinking on the architecture. We tried to do things that still maintain the horizontality, the one-story window expression. We didn't play with the multi-story window expression. It's really about that modern story expression, expressing the bands to increase the horizontality that you see in century modern architecture. There's more about that. I'm sure it will come up with some of these other questions. So
thank you very much.
So quick follow.
Well, let me go to James, and then we'll come back.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A couple questions for staff, kind of based on the conversation we're having. So maybe a question for Mr. Kreider. I'd like you to kind of weigh in on the kind of above grade parking, the issues there. It looks like there's a lot of blank wall, particularly near the park. So wondering kind of what your conversations have been with the applicant, where staff stands, if you could kind of weigh in on those, that'd be great.
Well, thank you. Yeah, just having also participated in the Glove study, we made it very clear when we did that, that we did not support above grade parking. So staff has consistently presented the position that we think that the ground floor should be activated and occupied. So our comments from the earliest submittals have been to recommend below grade parking. On the last round, recognizing that particularly the building facing Arlington Boulevard is a different set of circumstances than perhaps the building facing Pershing related to the garage. So perhaps thinking about each one of them a little differently may lead to some conclusions, both for the developer to adjust their plan, but also to work with them. And one of the suggestions which they've taken up is sort of grading up to along Arlington Boulevard and sort of mounding that and sort of disguising it, if you will. That's fairly doable, but there's greater challenges at Pershing that we think are just, we can't support right now, the above grade solution.
Yeah, Mr. Roberts, could you weigh in on where you are with that?
Sure. You know, it's something that through the SPRC process, I think continues to evolve. I guess starting with Arlington Boulevard, you know, one of the things to recognize is it really isn't at grade. It's actually built into the grade. So we sort of use that out as an opportunity for what you might consider sort of walk-up units in that area. So sort of building into the grade in that area, you wouldn't really get, you know, you couldn't use that space for something more active at that point. Ashton or Alan could get into the why of that. But what we've tried to do in response is really plus up the area around those staircases. So, you know, both in terms of the landscaping, reorienting those staircases so that they're not, you know, really giving you gaps and spaces between the building, and really trying to make it so that there's really not blank facade there. Frankly, also some safety concerns, right? Like if you have these staircases and nothing underneath them, it's something we've gone to the team. You know, is it landscaping? What kind of landscaping? Because you don't want it to thrive, you don't want it to die. Is it more facade element? We're working through it. I'd say that this is the current iteration and how we respond to that. On Pershing, I think there's a couple different solutions, a couple different things you can think about. Really, what that backs up to, especially up against the future park, is our bike room. So there may be opportunities to open that up as we've done in other projects. Certainly, there are examples of that this project team has worked on in the past. That all presents possibly an opportunity for public or other art in the future. So it's really, you know, there are certain things that we can and do plan for in the SPRC process, and certain things that have historically been, you know, edits for the future. So we're open to ideas and solutions in there. I don't think, you know, that anything on that side is in final. The only last point I think I'd make in terms of parking is the study did not say no parking at grade. It said focus if you're going to have parking at grade on retail. And that brings me to my absolute last point, and I promise I'll stop there. The last thing that this does is we've kept parking completely out of that future park area. So instead of expanding under the park like we've had in other, you know, projects, you get a full depth of that park. You get full filtration for stormwater and such as that. It really leaves a better condition for the park, in our opinion, into the future, as opposed to having to leave, you know, like a 5-foot soil depth of soil. It makes it harder to plant things and so on and so forth. So that was the other kind of half of that thinking, is that's a public park for the future. We can stay out of there entirely by kind of using the existing conditions of the site.
Okay.
So,
Right, so that's helpful. So a couple of reactions, I think, Mr. Roberts, based on that. So having led the LRPC process on this, the LRPC recommendation at the time was it was definitely to discourage above grade parking. But if you were to have it, it needs to be wrapped with active uses. And that's not what you're doing here. So necessarily. So I think the concern is you want to have eyes on the street, you want to have fenestration, you know, if it isn't going to be a real active use behind that, it needs to look like an active use. It needs to look like it's an actual, you know, actual store or something. And I think it's a concern, particularly if you go into a park space and it's, you know, it's a blank facade and it's dark and there's no, you know, kind of eyes on the street and it doesn't look like that, then that can become maybe a little ridiculous. So ideally, it's an active use. Ideally, it's a real use, like opening up the bike room or making that look like a accessible thing. But second to that would be something that looks like. And then back to staff. You know, I don't know, Mr. Kreider, if it's to you or to Mr. Schultz, but wondering if staff has reviewed the engineering analysis that the applicant has done on the historic sign, where you stand on that analysis.
Yeah, I've shared that with historic preservation, and they're fine with recreation of the sign as long as it, you know, uses the same materials and looks the same. Same thing with the lobby is they accept that, especially the sign is not in good shape after all these times. It's been altered many times, and to even make it meet modern code requirements for wind loads, it would need to be altered beyond recognition anyway. So it's better to just start again and make it look at that. They do feel, Historic Preservation Office, they do feel you know, that can we reuse some of the materials from the existing lobby? There's apparently some marble in there. There's some nice railings. The railings don't meet code. The lobby area, you know, again, that's the oldest part of the building from the mid-1950s, doesn't meet modern code. And as long as what we have here with the revised design looks relatively, to me, like an acceptable alternative.
That's helpful. And Mr. Roberts, what are your kind of plans at this stage to kind of reuse materials, you know, kind of materiality?
Sure. You know, I won't probably turn to Alan to talk about that a little bit. I would just say that, you know, we did take a lot of effort to look into this question. It was clearly one of the big outcomes, you know, from the special club study, something that everybody spent a lot of time on. The club study just simply didn't have the advantage of, you know, it's sort of forward looking. We didn't really have the advantage of the research at the time. So Alan, I don't know if you have any input on.
You know, anything that is impacted by code is difficult. You know, that's when the rails get hard. You know, the marble, I'm not sure. That one wasn't on my radar. I think there's some interesting interior design elements that we will, at the minimum, rip off of, because I think that's, you know, we like the design, and I think there's some aspects there we want to play on. I think to commit to reusing anything inside the lobby is probably a tall look at it. I think the one thing that probably has a lot more opportunity is landscape. You know, because you're less sort of dictated by code when it comes to, you know, site walls, things like that. There's a lot of limestone. It's not limestone, but these sort of blackstone features. So I think that's something we've been thinking about internally. So there's opportunities there. I think that feels like the right place to do it, and not sort of run the risk of code issues. You know, it is part of the identity of the building.
Yeah, for sure. So I thank you for doing the analysis. I know that was a big part of the LRPC process, so thank you for that. I know we landed in a place maybe where not where everybody wanted to, but you know, understanding the issues. With respect to the reuse of the materials, there is an embodied carbon benefit to potentially trying to reuse some of these materials. So to the extent that you can do that, it also may help you with your LEED scorecard and things like that for this building. So something else to encourage you beyond just also the historic aspect. There's also some other potential and intended, you know, unintended or other potential benefits here that I would encourage you to consider. But thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Scholl. I wanted to turn to Adam from Parks and Rec Commission to give your overall feedback, or if you specifically want to address your thoughts about the architecture surrounding the future park and how much it should be activated in what ways. So I'd love to hear about that too.
Sure. So thank you. This is my first meeting with you guys. So I did look at the presentation, starting up with that. So it's really nice to see the additional biophilia coverage on the site. I have a couple of questions about that. So what is the square footage of the actual park easement?
It'll be about 10,000.
About 10,000?
Yeah.
Okay. And then what is the percentage of biophilia coverage now on the site?
Gabriella with land design is on from the project team. If I could pitch that to her, because that's much more available. Gabriella, can you hear us?
I can. Good evening. Sorry, my light is pretty poor here in my living room. See if that's better. Good evening. Can you repeat the question, please?
Sure, I was wondering what the biophilia coverage now with the updated design is on the site. What percentage of the
How much pervious area?
plan for? Biophilia, I mean, pervious and impervious is kind of hard to match up. What I'm looking for is how much of it is either park space or biophilia coverage.
Landscaping and
Yeah.
things.
I think that, yeah, the biophilic, we're continuing to craft a story, and I think the site has a lot of potential and have a lot of benefits. It's an incredible corner. The added setback that Arlington Boulevard offers, it benefits the site from the biophilia standpoint because we have an enhanced streetscape. Pershing Drive will have a enhanced streetscape that complies with Arlington standards and in a more urban setting, which we have a frontage and we have the access and the vehicular way. The park itself, like Matt said, is 10,000 or thereabouts square feet. Will be mostly dedicated to green space. And of course, there will be walkways and sidewalks that lead to and from retail. Around the corner by the Wayne Avenue and then the interface with the southern property, there will be also an enhanced sort of landscape at a different sort of calibration, because there's a, thank you for bringing the graphic. So I'm doing like this with my hands. And so as you can see just from the graphic, it's a very green, it's an envelope by green in different sort of modalities based on what the project or what that facade or what that frontage looks like. As far as percentage, I don't have it from the top of my head from pervious and impervious. I'm sure it's been calculated. We can give you an answer shortly or soon thereafter this meeting. The biophilia story, what we are trying to enhance here. Oh, and I forgot to say, if you see that kind of that corner of Boulevard, Arlington Boulevard and Pershing, it's a fairly pronounced setback from the right of way all the way to the corner, which allows us to add even more planting, more greenery, more gardens, more elements of biophilia. And it has to do with natural elements, layering of the landscape, seasonal interest, you know, making sure that even in the dead of the winter in February, all the landscape stands, you know, viable and vibrant, and do all these things that what we as pedestrians love to see. So at the end of the day, we're still crafting the story, how the sensory experience is enhanced through the site, and like I said, in the different facets and frontages of the property. I hope that answers your question. I think we're still going to try to, we have identified our goals, which are very similar to obviously in following the policies of Arlington County when it comes to biophilic design. And we're hoping that we can make you all proud. I think we're still working on what are those elements specifically, but hopefully I already gave you a framework of that.
Okay. Yeah.
And Adam, our next meeting will be covering sustainability, biophilia, and public spaces in more depth. So hopefully we can get some of those actual stats for you at that meeting.
Perfect.
Thank you much.
Yeah, thank you. And I just have one other quick question, but now obviously we're focused on the building mostly. The park design process for this, I'm new to this SPRC. How does that work? Is that something that's going to be turned over to the county process?
Yes, yeah, the Department of Parks and Recreation was going to take ownership of the design of the space itself. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
So our goal here is to make sure that around it is good design too. Yeah.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Mari, do you want to speak to the sign, the lobby, the design of the architecture overall, or anything else?
Yeah, sure thing. I have a lot of points that have been sort of made regarding the sign and lobby. I mean, obviously, I was disheartened to hear that both the sign and lobby are sort of being deemed unusable, basically. So I guess just to ask the question, just kind of put it out there. I mean, in terms of the sign itself, it seems that the sign is potentially, I mean, maybe unusable, but also I just want to ask the question: is there any possibility of actually reusing the sign and sort of like basically reinforcing the sign sort of as it's now? I mean, it is standing now. I mean, I realize it may be standing by, you know, by very little, but it is standing currently. Reinforce what's there now, and also
So the short answer is, you know, based on everything that we know, is no, without warping the panel, without basically putting it back in a way that you wouldn't really recognize today. So the consultant that we hired is a group that does this pretty much exclusively. Historic preservation engineering is really what they do. In fact, they came at the recommendation of some of the folks on the Building Code Appeals Board. So, they do this frequently in DC and Virginia as well, which is why we chose them. So when they went out and looked at the sign in particular, the lobby has its own issues, but when you read the report, you get the real sense that if you were to dismantle that structure, you couldn't pay that. So that's why when as between those two positions, we say, can we do a better job sort of paying homage to that? Yeah, we think we can.
It's also attached to the building, so it's not freestanding. So it would have to move or be, repositioned regardless. So it's depending on the building as part of its structure. So I think that also presents some challenges.
That's okay. I guess with that, I guess the sort of new sign, new sign you have here. Is it the same size as the current sign, or is it bigger, smaller? Is it okay? I think I would sort of piggyback on what Commissioner Commissioner Sarli mentioned. I think it would be a good idea to sort of give this sign a little bit more of a free feel from the building. I think it's a good idea to actually have it sort of not be so. I mean, it seems a little bit sort of too connected to the building the way it's rendered now. I mean, maybe it's partially just the rendering itself, but I think that it was a good idea. Sorry, about that. In terms of the and I also commend your team for actually lowering the height of that lobby space. But I think that really helps sort of pays homage to what's there currently. And as far as the lobby not being reused, I do understand why that might be difficult, sort of given probably your sort of lead, energy targets. But again, that wasn't a forced thing to hear that. That's also not something that can be reached very, very easily. But one point that hasn't been touched on, is there any discussion right now, or I would rather propose actually that the project include some sort of historical interpretive signage, or sort of a marker, or some sort of something explaining what was here previously. I think that actually part of maybe the site package potentially, or somewhere on the site. This is sort of.
I mean, it's certainly a possibility. I won't tell you that we've had any deep discussions on it, or we'll go ahead. That's something both consultation with staff, JLRB, and others. There's a lot of space on a building where in the future we'll be able to kind of do something like that. It's certainly called out in the study, so it's not something we're unfamiliar with.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amari. Is there anybody who's an SPRC member who hasn't gotten a chance to share yet?
Hi, Kate Donahue from Forestry and Natural Resources. Sure, I'll have a lot more to say the next meeting, but just a couple of things. First of all, we really appreciated the expansion on the southern side and the way, and the park areas and everything that you're trying to do to make as much of the area landscaped as possible. I think that really is going to add a lot. I really like all the EV spaces. Hope that however that garage is, that building's going to be there for a long time, that there's some thought given to how you can easily in the future, expand even more spaces so that as EVs become more and more used, spaces can be added in so people juice up their cars. The one question, a couple of us get this big conversation about bird-friendly glass. And I'm not really sure what the Arlington standard is for that, but our feeling is that we need to have it on the lower levels, but also where we're going to have big canopy trees and where that's near the glass, it needs to be at the higher levels. And looking at your drawings, and I'm not sure if this is just for the drawings or if this is how it's an actual rendition, but it looks like you have container trees at various levels. And if you're going to have trees at those levels that are near glass, it would be a good idea to have the bird-friendly glass there as well. And just one other thing, which I'm sure I'll mention next time too, but I'm going to throw it out here before we talk about the landscape. I would encourage as many large canopy trees as possible for this space. Arlington is losing its big canopy trees right and left. A lot of reasons for it. We keep trying to plant trees, but it's going to be forever before they get to be big. But the more that we can do, the better. So as you're looking at your landscaping, put in your big canopy trees. You can always do your understory trees, the flowers, your dogwoods and redbuds, and do your, you know, your forbs and your perennials and that kind of thing. But the FNRC will be really happy if you could really focus on those canopy trees. And especially for the street trees, I don't know if you've given thought to having the soil containers under the sidewalks so that we can, there's also some honeycombing. Vincent, the urban forester, can, you know, read you the book on this, but it can make a huge, huge difference on whether street trees can actually survive in that environment and actually grow to be big and, you know, kind of be the presence that we would like. So I know all of that kind of has to be built in up front, so that's why I'm bringing it up.
And if it's looking for an example of that at Jenny Dean Park,
Yeah.
they've done that with the trees, streets.
Great. Now I'll go to Chris for topics on building form and architecture. And then I think we have Leo as the last comment, and then we'll move on to transportation.
Sarah here.
Oh, I have one question.
I'll just wait.
Oh, okay. Leo, architecture question.
All right, I didn't talk about the Wilson Boulevard side, and then when Commissioner Schultz started talking about the parking, still about, sorry, the Route 50, Route 50, my bad. Probably very alert, that was a test for alertness. I'm very skeptical of that little balcony with those stairs and debris sort of getting blown under there, you know, animals, developing little cocoons or whatever. I think that needs to be developed a little bit more. And I don't know if that becomes part of the residence entrance, if it gets fenced off, it becomes balcony.
Where is this? Can someone bring up on the screen where you're talking about?
I think the rendering is the best one.
Do you know what slide it is?
Yeah, I'll bring it up. Give me a moment.
I don't, they don't have. Yeah, it's right after the diagrams, which, by the way, thanks for doing the diagram. I disagree with the historic analysis a little bit. There's a Alvar Alto, but not 15. That pretty there. Am I not correct or am I wrong? I could be wrong. My architecture history professor could be totally rolling straight right now. But nonetheless, I do appreciate the historic reference, you know, the analysis and diagrams, because they're always helpful. Slide 16, if you can pull it up.
16.
So if you can zoom in to the like lower left corner where the entrances are. Yeah.
That's previous.
That's the oldest.
This is the previous.
Okay, so I'm gone. What's the new design look like then?
They mounded up against the building.
Okay, I see. So what happens under there, I guess, is the next question, if there's an opportunity to, you know, put some sort of, and this might be on the next SPRC, if you can put some bio retention or, you know, water retention tanks under there, and stormwater. I don't know. So, and again, you don't have to answer. That's just sort of flagging that as I think in here.
There's an option
Develop.
somewhere within there already. And I think it was our intent to not, somebody could like, you know, like.
Yeah.
That was set before.
Okay.
And, you know, lowering the scale of those stairs, so to have, it was one of the things we did, we actually created two, like, we combined the stairs. So I think that we tried to mitigate the height of the stairs by bringing two problems. So I think that helped address the couple.
Perfect. And I apologize for being a little slow catching up. So I feel like the problem's been flagged. So thank you.
Thank you, Richard Charlie. Commissioner Steinberger.
Thanks. So I wanted to follow up on regards to the materials that are, you know, in the existing site condition that may or may not be able to be repurposed into the site as, you know, planned now. But if there's materials that can be salvaged and are of, you know, historic value or would be useful to someone else, I'd like to see that those get repurposed to someone else if it can't be used with the site. So I'd like to, see a plan or kind of what that would look like in terms of minimizing our waste impact in a way that we can.
Yeah.
Well, maybe not the sign, but if there's more or other materials, I understand the sign may be a lost cause, fine. HLRB is okay with a, historically accurate recreation of that. Who am I to say otherwise? For a sign that would otherwise disintegrate. But the other materials, it sounds like there might be, I think it's worth the conversation to figure out if there is material of value there and should be a nice donation to some entity to do something.
Yeah, that's actually a standard condition.
Oh, great.
For any building that might have some sort of historic value, to let the historic preservation team go inside it and
Great.
salvage, if they want,
So there's no reason to think that wouldn't happen here.
Yeah,
Okay, great.
maybe we could tweak the standard to, get a little more specific about things too.
For the record, we have no problem with that.
Great.
I have a couple of problems. First of all, do want to say, do like the sawtooth on Arlington Boulevard. It's really brick. It looks, it's different. It looks good. The vault is being moved, the transformer vault. I think that moving it from the south end is good. It really does make a difference having those extra windows there. I think that will be helpful for security purposes. It just looks better too. Yeah, you're moving it to underneath on Persian Drive. That's fine, but the renderings show that there are still 2 trees there. Is that going to be a problem, or is that just an artifact that you just didn't remove those trees? Or will you still be able to have 2 trees right next to that transformer vault?
So the, John, I'll be the best person to speak to that. I mean, there is a requirement that the vaults 5 feet below.
No,
Utility lids are not, the whole vault. It's just a couple 10 by 12 lids. And I think our 10 would be to have landscape above them. I think John L can speak to the trees. John L, are you able to pipe in here?
Hi, Alan. I am able to pipe in. Can you hear me?
Yes.
And can you please restate the question exactly about the transformers?
The transformer vault will now be on Persian Drive under the sidewalk.
Correct.
The renderings that you've been showing still have a couple of trees that would be right next to the vault there between the street and the sidewalk where the vaults would be. Was that an artifact of the earlier rendition, or will those trees in fact be able to be still there with the vault underneath?
Great question. And so Alan started to talk about that 5-foot utility-free zone. So basically what you have is the vault is about 17 feet deep, 17 feet itself. And if you have 5 feet of dirt on top of it, the bottom of the vault's at 22 feet. So what happens is in between every lift out panel, we can put a street tree there and 5 feet of soil. And that's Commissioner, that's a pretty common thing. You've seen that all over the county now in the last, dozen years, 15 years. So you can't put them on top of the lift out panels, but in between lift out panels, about 27 feet on center, generally speaking. So the answer is yes, the drawing was correct, and there'd be some trees in between the lift out panels. So we have to artfully place the lift out panels with respect to how the tree grows.
Hey, well, great. That's perfect.
That said, we're still dying. That is our intent.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Okay, so now I'd like to move on to our next topic of discussion, transportation. If you have further comments about building form and architecture, we will have a final comments section at the end of the evening, so you can still make a comment about that. But now we'll talk about transportation. So this could include parking garages, the staff concerned about the above grade parking, pickup, drop off, loading docks, pedestrian safety around the site, protected bike lanes, EV parking, the transit stop. So any of these topics are fair game, as well as anything else that you feel like is transportation related that I concur with. So why don't we start with Chris Slatt to get us going?
All right, like 3 questions, but I think they're all really quick. The special club study talked about this site should make some improvements to the bus stop that's there on Arlington Boulevard. But actually, I think maybe we've changed our routes so that that bus stop is no longer serviced by any buses. But
4B, yeah, 4B or whatever it is doesn't exist anymore.
Okay, great. So we're just gonna kind of leave that.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens in the future. Okay. Great, so that was nice and quick. Can you confirm, does the bike room have direct access from the outside? So they have a door.
Direct access inside.
I'd love to see that. Is there any detail yet on what the vertical separation is going to be in the protected bike lane? There are two small curbs, but the rest of it is just currently shown as kind of striped buffer area. Do we know who's putting in there? John or David?
Yeah.
I was gonna say John might be able to.
Yeah, actually, we had a really good meeting with Dennis Sellen last week to talk about this exact issue, and we're looking at a couple of different options. One is we're going to keep the existing curbs where they are, both on the north and on our side as well. And what we talked about was having bike lanes. It's yet to be determined. You can see those striped areas there. Those are about 3 feet wide. And we talked about, and we've had a conversation also with the fire department about this as well. And we talked about, should we have raised concrete curbs in between those, or what should it be? But basically, we talked about a 3 foot wide spacing, that striped area there.
Okay, so you don't know what's going to go.
We don't have it yet, but we're working. How's that?
We're probably leaning towards those concrete raised curbs, but they have to be mountable for a fire truck. And also, I'm very concerned about drainage with those as well. So we'd have something with like openings below them, so that water can flow through them to the curbs.
But just to clarify, Chris, is your question the bike lane itself or the separation?
My question was what was going as the separation.
So Dennis, we're talking about, as we said, those mountable curbs, and this conversation needs to be had with the fire marshal as well. His concern was having, if you have the paddles, for example, his concern is about having a fire truck run over those things, and because of what it might do to the damage in the bottom of his truck. So it's kind of a work in progress right now to determine exactly, but probably I'm thinking 4.5 inch tall concrete curbs separating the travel lanes from the bikes.
We're not looking at flexible bollards.
Correct, right.
Good, yeah. Be perfectly happy to end up with the forms that have gone in on Clark Street, which
Okay.
I know the fire marshal has approved in the past. So yeah, those are my questions. I will just throw a couple quick comments in as long as I'm here. Strongly supportive of PBLs on both sides of Pershing Drive as an offsite transportation benefit. If there's bonus density returned. I would love to see some trail amenities in the plaza at Arlington Boulevard in Pershing. I'm really afraid it's going to end up feeling exactly like the plaza directly across Pershing Drive, which you never see anybody in. It's hard to even just like meet someone there because none of the benches face each other. Like it's also really feels like a plaza that's designed to keep people away. I hope this one will be better. And I think, having some stuff that people go there to do, whether it's refilling a water bottle or pulling up a bike tire or, getting able to sit across from each other at, God forbid, a table, even if there isn't a coffee shop right there to buy it from, would be awesome. And I'm calling that transportation because it's activity for the trail. We'll talk about it again in open space next time. And I really applaud the architecture that faces the trail, the entrances, the redesigned stairs, the landscaping, the potential berming. We talk a lot about, what does trail-oriented architecture look like and how can we increase the safety of the trail through that design. I think this really gets it. Excited to see it. So that's all I've got for right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Commissioner Scholl.
Yeah, I have just a question, two questions and then I guess a comment. So on the site circulation slide, I think it's your slide 42. Just want to make sure I understand. Coming off of Wayne, is the intent to have left in, right out? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so then is this slide incorrect that there's a left out of point?
What intersection are you talking about?
Wayne to Pershing. There's a left out.
Sorry, that's offsite. It's this closer.
Oh, that's the left.
Correct. That would be the left into the building in that shared views area with a right out, which is responding to comments we heard from the very get-go during the special left study. As you know, not directing more traffic.
Okay, because it looks like there's on slide 43 doesn't have the left out from Wayne to Pershing. We will correct that. So
that is missing.
okay,
Yeah.
I just want to make sure I understood.
You'll be able to turn left, but we can't, yeah, you'll be able to turn left from, Lane on.
Okay, because I saw sort of that projected pedestrian crossing. I just want to make sure that that wasn't intending to on the cross section. Yeah, sure. Okay, that's all.
It's a good catch.
Yeah,
Okay, just want to make sure I understand. And then on the EV parking, so your intent is to provide 8 EV parking spaces, so 8 EVSC, and then 23 EV ready spaces, correct?
That's right.
Okay. So, just flagging this for you all for next time, which is that, you'll get this from, C2E2, which is that they're asking for a lot more EV parking than that. And I think, to try to meet our goals with the county, energy plan. So it's probably more like 20 EVSC and more like half of your parking spaces being EV ready. The rationale for that is that it's up to 6 times more expensive to rehab a building adequately. And so it's better to just do it now. Understanding that, there's concerns with additional electrical capacity and things like that. It's still more expensive to do it. So I would encourage you to try to do as much as you can.
Sure. One thing that we're continuing to look at, especially as we move the vault from the south end into Pershing, are there opportunities, to increase the size of that vault slightly for, something that's future ready? It's in consideration. I can't say that we hit, a 50% overall. I think that'd be difficult to be handed. But yeah, it's on our minds.
Okay, that's good. Thanks. That's all.
Thank you. I'd like to go to the Teams app. I see Lizzie has raised her hand from Pedestrian Advisory. So you can come off mute and share your questions and thoughts.
Hi, everyone. Again, I'm Lizzie Gallagher from the Pedestrian Advisory Committee. This is my first SPRC, so thank you. Learning a lot, having a great time. So the questions I have are specifically around the Muse area, the shared use trail there. So I noticed that on the flow diagrams, we have cars going in both directions, and it's also a bike access point to get all the way through the trail, and there's also pedestrians. At least those exiting the like townhome units kind of that face that Muse area. And so the only detail I saw in the documents was about kind of using non-traditional paving and that it would all be kind of at the same grade. I was wondering if you could speak more to steps that are being taken. It just seems like a lot of uses, and when there's a lot of uses, typically the fastest and biggest users win. So I was wondering if you could maybe speak to the conditions that you're planning on implementing to keep that a safe space for all users, especially our most vulnerable road users.
Question.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is a landscape differentiation, and it is largely curved. I think Gabby, if you're able to speak to the details of that.
As she's coming online, I think the important piece to remember is that the shared Muse and what goes into it, kind of comes directly out of the CLEF study and a call to really connect the trail to the neighborhood. So the idea that not just, secondary access to take some of the pressure off of the Pershing entrance, but also, an opportunity to not have everybody have to go around the site to reconnect to the trail. So Gabby, I see you. So
Thanks, Matt, for that. And thank you for bringing a diagram or a graphic that shows a little bit of detail so that we can describe it a little bit better is the next one. So yes, to Matt's point, you're right. There's a lot of there's a convergence of different uses at different times, but let's bear in mind that this is a low speed, low traffic area. Only the residents, they are, part of coming in and out of their, the units are to walk through and drop off, occasional drop off, that kind of thing, but it certainly should not compare to just a normal public street. We are anticipating a differentiated paving, as you can see in this illustration, to provide pedestrians to a path of refuge that is different from the cars, even though it's supposed to be a shared street. So at the end of the day, as you can see, the person walking the dog and someone else, I mean, it's to be mostly dominated, or at least welcoming all kinds of people, and at the same time be safe. To address the comments on the quantity and quality of landscape in this area, the stoops outside of those units have been increased in the, not necessarily in square foot, well, total, but the level and density of the landscaping as well, to provide a much more amenitized sort of pedestrian experience. So at the end of the day, it will be a combination of textural paving to announce a little bit of a not quite a rumble strip, but something that has texture, so it advises vehicular sort of drivers to go a little slower. Potentially some signage, the differentiated paving between the pedestrian only and the shared environment, and then certainly having that scale between the buffer side between the southern property and our project and the stoops, to have as much landscape as it's possible, due to soil volume availability. So hopefully, with a combination of all of these, and not hopefully, I mean, that is a standard, or that's our intended approach, and we will continue to study to make sure that that's as safe as it needs to be.
Wonderful. I just have two quick follow-ups about that. Thank you for your answer. So the two other primary concerns besides the treatment is it's a 90-degree angle there, and especially if we have wonderful landscaping, just worried about the visibility of cars coming around the corner, and bikes or pedestrians kind of going through to access the trail. So just kind of wanting to raise that concern of lack of visibility and kind of going around that corner. And then the second is that opening to the trail looks quite inviting, and we want it could be confusing in the diagrams. I was surprised not to see kind of metal bollards or other physical barriers that would prevent, a very confused driver from entering onto the trail using that nice wide entrance.
That's a very good point you make. The answer on the first question will be fully addressed, and there are side distances, side triangles, setbacks, and all kinds of standards that keep us from having the problems that you just mentioned on the intersection. So we'll make sure that those are fully compliant. The bollards that you mentioned, we're studying the layout and maybe elements that we add on as this process continues and we take on feedback. We're still trying to make sure that that space is inviting and at the same time not the confused drivers. So very good point raised. If it's not in the renderings, it's because we probably haven't gotten to that detail, but we'll take your comment. Thank you very much.
That's all for me.
Okay, and I'd also like to go on virtual to Doris, who has her hand raised from the Disability Advisory Commission. Doris, you can come off mute and share your thoughts on transportation.
Yes, thank you. I was just wondering, to begin with, I have a question and then some comments. My question is, have you taken the opportunity to perhaps walk the route of travel that a pedestrian would take from the building to public transit going both east and west? Because I noted that you talked about the 4A bus route and the bus stop out on Arlington Boulevard, but I didn't hear you talk about the path of travel to a bus stop that would be going eastbound towards Courthouse and Roslyn. So I'm wondering if you have taken the opportunity to both walk that and roll that using a manual wheelchair.
I have walked those routes. This is Ashton from Studios, but I have not rolled them. So I am sensitive that there are many sidewalks in Lyon Park that are less than ideally accessible. But that said, the improvements that are being planned on this site are, as Alan noted earlier, are something that's we're taking very seriously.
Yeah, I would suggest that you may want to do that, and when you take the walk again with a blind person or a person with a significant vision impairment, because, for example, if I was a pedestrian coming from that building, I would go out to the Arlington Boulevard stop to go westbound to Seven Corners or, Arlington Forest or wherever. But if I was going in town, right now, given the condition of the sidewalks and the routing of buses, I would probably take a bus from either on Pershing Drive, cross George Mason and take a bus from Pershing Drive, or I would turn left and go up to get the bus. I wouldn't necessarily go around the corner and across Arlington Boulevard, because both the topography and the pedestrian, the sidewalks are pretty much inaccessible or minimally accessible, and because it's a closer route it's a closer route to go to Pershing, or even to go up at Henderson and George Mason and catch a bus. But so with that in mind, I also want to suggest that you take a look at the sidewalk widths and if you're going to expand them or not. But more importantly, I would like you to take a second look think about having protected bike lanes up there on Pershing Drive, because Pershing is not that big a street, number one. Number two, having bicycle lanes, where you have to go past the protected bicycle lane with a wall and navigate as a blind person to cross the street, is actually quite dangerous. And then you're going to also allow micro mobility devices, which will make it a very, very confusing situation for pedestrians with disabilities. And so we've had this discussion on a number of occasions about various protected bike lanes at the Disability Commission meetings, and particularly when the topic came up also in Crystal City, and we have our concerns about that, but in a kind of small, I'm going to call it a kind of small residential area like the one up where the ARVA is, I'm very concerned about that. And then the other comment that I have is that I think the building does need. Where is it? Are you going to have a drive up at the building? Drive up, pick up for pedestrians and residents of the building who might be coming there on taxi or Uber or paratransit like Star or Metro Access. Are you going to have?
Yes.
Which side of the building, or both?
It's on the Pershing Drive side, kind of mid block. It's if you could see the screen, it's where my mouse is. That there's it's between the lobby and the retail equivalent space, north facing.
And so it's going to be covered from the curve too.
It'll have a zone that is covered from the curb into the lobby of the building for a kind of.
Of course, this is Matt Roberts. There's essentially a lay-by built into our near drop off. So it is within the interior of the site. So it's off Pershing Drive, again, on the southern side of Pershing, directly facing out from the lobby. So you have an access point directly into a lay-by area for pickup.
So, and that's going to be a security system protected door?
Back is covered.
Huh? To the
Are
building?
you asking if the access to the building is via fob?
With key fob, that's what I meant, yeah.
That-
Okay,
that's-
so, I'm wondering if that's gonna be an automatic door that opens,
It's required.
you know, automatically
Yeah,
rather
those
than,
doors
rather
read.
than push button.
Yes.
Yes.
I think there are conventions on it's gonna be a new entrance, right, because you're working on the lobby.
It'll be an entirely new building, correct?
Yeah, entirely new building, okay.
Thank
So,
you. Is
yeah,
there,
so those are the things that I'm thinking of in terms of path of travel from the building to public transportation and to the pedestrian infrastructure there to walk around the community and such. Because there's also shopping up there on Pershing Drive that people can avail themselves of. So I'm really concerned, and I know a number of blind friends of mine who have lived down there in that building and also wheelchair users. So, you know, it's a reality because it's not speculation that people with disabilities are going to live there, because the location is so ideal for somebody who doesn't drive because of their disability, because of the transportation and all. So the one thing I
Doris,
would.
thank you very much for your comments. I
Yeah,
appreciate
thank you. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Is there anybody else in the room that wants to talk or ask a question or has an opinion about
Yeah.
transportation?
Yeah,
Aaron.
this is my more of my bicycle committee hat. You guys are going from like 4 curb cuts right now on the site to, I'm thinking about anytime there's a perpendicular event possible between a car and a pedestrian or a bike. I'm counting like 18 of them in the new plan. You got 12 parking spots that back up into pedestrian and bicycle areas. You've got the 2 curb cuts to the street. You've got 2 parking garages and the loading dock. And all those are perpendicular interfaces with pedestrian walkways. That's one of the reasons I think the parking needs to be underground, needs to be one single access to the garage. We know where it is. We're not having cars everywhere and bicycles and pedestrians everywhere overlapping in so many different possible places. Below ground, and I'd really like to see the parking extended to under the whole building on P2 instead of just half, to get the parking ratio up, get them down from below the surface. At least at that part where they're right along the Muse or the interior, do you call it an alley or the interior road that goes under the buildings, that all Muse?
It's not the views per se, that's just
Just the drive.
Internal drive, yeah. I mean, because some of that's also pedestrian and bike and.
It's really, yeah, not a pedestrian or bike zone under the building there. I wouldn't consider it.
Well, you gotta get to the front door from somewhere.
Yeah, the bike room will be at
Yeah.
first level and then be accessible both directly out into the parking area as well as, out into the.
And there's actually an elevator right near the bike room as well, so there's access.
Yeah.
Without actually crossing. I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
it's hard. That was.
I don't, as long as you mentioned the bike room, I'd follow up. I think the bike room's in the wrong spot. I think it should be in that interior road instead of up along the park. If I'm coming off the trail, I'm coming to a road, I'd like to go to the bike room right from there, not go and have to go through the park and whatever that park looks like. I think there's space, that storage room or whatever. I'm not sure the best place, but it seems the wrong place to be along the park.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add, no matter where the bike room ends up, where it is right in the elevation, you have it up against the park. It is kind of a blank gap in between the retail and the residential units on the south. So if there's a way to swap the bike room somewhere else and put residential units on that area.
Or expand the retail.
Yeah, or expand the retail, yeah.
Thank you, Aaron. Anybody else? Amari?
Is there short-term bike parking sort of sprinkled around the site, or is it more on Pershing, or is it sort of, where is that short-term parking?
There is. Gabby, can probably pinpoint, I believe there's short-term parking at the entry on Arlington Boulevard. We have a secondary entry. There's some that are closer to the retail space in the park.
Okay.
That is, yes, that is correct. Thanks, Alan.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Additional comments or questions about transportation? Nobody on virtual. Okay, well then, we can move to the final comments portion of our agenda, which I just like to do a quick round robin, and everybody can take a minute to just kind of say your final thoughts on anything we've discussed tonight, building forum architecture, transportation, but before we kind of wrap up and do public comments. So Commissioner Steinberger, can we start with you?
Sure. I've enjoyed the evolution of the sign and sort of where we've kind of come to. I think we're moved in a very positive direction. I sort of like the thin. I won't get involved in whether or not it's prominent enough. I like it. Fine. I'm pleased to know that it is a standard site condition that we do look to repurpose materials from. I did not realize that. I should have exposed. So thank you for educating me. And again, I think that the question about sort of parking above grade is always going to kind of come back, and I'm not necessarily satisfied with where we are at with this. So I do think that's going to be something that I'm looking for as this comes before the planning commission. Ultimately, that's something that is an area of concern for me, and something that I think will get a lot of attention from not just me, but other planning commissioners. So I trust that there may be some evolution in terms of masking or sort of the design of that. If we're going to have above grade parking, let's make that the most beautiful above grade parking that we've ever seen. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Adam.
So just a couple quick things. Again, I'm looking forward to seeing what the Biophilia plan is for the details about which kind of plantings they're going to be doing. I'm assuming that we'll get that in March. I think that's it for now.
Thank you, Martin.
Thanks. So again, it's important that the sign is unusable, and also the lobby as well. But sort of given that, I think that the direction that design's headed in terms of recreating the sign, and also sort of recreating sort of the spirit of the lobby, I think those are good things. And I would sort of piggyback on, as I've said, anywhere where you can reuse historical materials from the existing building in a new way, I think will also sort of enhance the sort of a harkening back to those historical heritage of the site. And also I would also like that there should be some sort of historical interpretation signage, something on either somewhere in the public realm on site, ideally.
Thank you. Okay.
I too am looking forward to the landscaping plan. It's more my bailiwick, but I think from what I've seen of the before and after, the changes that have been made, they're all going in the right direction. I think it's a lot of improvement. And I like the berms. Really looking forward to see what the details of the basis. Thank you.
It's a beautiful building from the Arlington Boulevard side. I like the sawtooth and lots of things. I'd love to see more color in there, reminiscent of the ARVA, whatever googly style. Sorry, I'm not an architect, but a splash of color, make it less serious. I would totally welcome that. I am concerned as a resident that lives just a block from there about traffic circulation. If we're forcing left in, right out, Wayne, how are we going to enforce that? How are we going to build the structure and the route to encourage that? Why not have it at an angle instead of a T intersection? Concerned with parking, as I mentioned. Stuff along Arlington Boulevard, 6 feet down, that's totally reasonable, makes sense. But the surface stuff or anything close to surface, just to accommodate the townhomes, I don't think is a legitimate reason. I'd like to see the townhomes have more 3-bedroom options. I think they're all listed at 2-bedroom. I don't know if the design is done yet, but there's lots of families that are looking for something that's a little bit more affordable, that's got a little bit more green access, and there's tons of options for the 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, people out there. So again, love to see some retail, substantial retail in there, both corners. So that would be great. Otherwise, very nice building. Just make it even better, please.
Yeah, moving in the right direction. Very happy to see the changes that have been made so far. It's a little ways to go, but the right way. I would like to see for the next time, maybe a little more renderings of the muse, how that's going to operate, design of it, what the experience is there. Right now, the renderings are really good, but I think we'd like to zero in on some of the more solid. See that. Same with the Arlington Boulevard side, how those stoops and doors, how that's going to look, getting more detailed rendering there, so we can really better feel for it. Again, I think we all like the changes, but it's hard to actually visualize them with the renderings that you have right now. Otherwise, yeah, move the right way.
Great. I really appreciate the PAC rep raising the interface of views and the trail. It is important to keep intrusion out there. I will say bollards are a last resort. There are lots of other great design ways to signal the vehicles. They are absolutely the wrong place. One of the common ones seems to be landscaping kind of in the center, and then leaving a nice wide trail on either side, but small enough that cars don't try and go to the sides, rather than something that someone might run into and injure themselves on. I really want to see a lively, active plaza. Adjacent retail has been one way to accomplish that, but there are other ways. So I have to hear about that at the next SPRC. I really appreciate the improvements to the trail. I think it looks great. I would prefer to see the above grade parking fully wrapped in active uses or moved underground or that's fine with me. I'm supportive of the parking ratio otherwise, and everything else I've already said.
Great. So yeah, I agree this is moving in the right direction. Generally, I like how it's generally in concurrence with the special bluff study, the heights and massing and transitions. So thank you for that. Would like to also see the parking either move below grade or wrapped with active uses, as Commissioner Slot mentioned. As I noted, would like to see a little bit more EV parking here, actually substantially more. We'll want to see next time when we're talking about community benefits, how you're achieving the affordable housing requirements here, to kind of beyond the base. So we'd like to, more information on that next time. And then on the plaza issue, I do have concerns about that as well. And there is guidance in the public spaces master plan on towards the end of that document about guidance for kind of private plazas and things of that nature. So, and Mr. Kreider could help if you have questions on that. So, thank you.
My turn?
Yes.
Thank you for the great presentation. I will second a lot of the comments that were said just now. I will highlight the great design. It holds the corner well. I think that's a significant achievement in and of itself. And I think it creates a sense of gateway, as much as I'm reticent to use the word gateway in Arlington. It seems like we have a gateway everywhere. But I think that works well, and it bodes well with the neighbor across the street. I think the sign needs a little bit of work. I think a little bit more prominence, a little bit more attention given to the sign, the historic sign. Notwithstanding Commissioner Sarah's comments that she's indifferent to it, I think there's an opportunity to celebrate that in a fun, googie. That's a term of art, googie. It's really hard to word. It comes from the ancient Greek. And I do have to second the above grade parking that is problematic, and I think I would like to reinforce that. But the way the building tapers towards the neighbors, particularly along Route 50, not Wilson Boulevard, is good, and I think it's achieving a lot of its goals. And then I like some of the creative typologies, but I will echo Aaron's comments that more three bedrooms would be good. But I think a lot of the typologies with the walkouts, although I was critical of them at first, I think you guys, that's a really fun thing where you walk out straight onto the pathway and along the view. So great job overall. I think you're doing great improvement and keep on your.
And let's go to virtual. Elizabeth Gallagher, Ms. Gallagher from Pedestrian Advisory. Any final thoughts for the night?
Yeah, I have two final thoughts. The first is I think we were a little remiss and didn't talk about micromobility in the transportation section. Yeah, just kind of like what the plan is for the inevitable pile of scooters that will end up on the site because it'll be so popular, your site. And so there are various corrals that the county has been trying out. I'm not sure if any SPRCs have accounted for micromobility, but it's a good thing to be thinking about from the forefront because it's not going away. And then the second, I appreciated the representative from the BAC kind of bringing up the concern about the location of the bike room. As I was going back to the diagram, it does look like there's a possibility of contention. Like if you're, riding to the bike room from the trail, you will likely, because of the curb cuts, take that sidewalk on Pershing, which I think is only 6 feet wide, which is a little skinny, especially if you're trying to fit both uses. And so by moving the bike room, you might be able to kind of reduce that contention on that skinny sidewalk there. But yeah, otherwise, I like the plan. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And Doris, do you have any final comments about what we've talked about tonight? Doris, do you want to have a last comment?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I was unmuting.
That's fine.
At any rate, I want to say thank you for the presentation, and I'm looking forward to what you're going to do here because I ride the 4A and 4B all the time, but and it's always been actually a kind of at least a landmark, a calming landmark to know that I'm going past that building and I'll soon be home. So at any rate, I think it's a very needed redevelopment, and I do hope that you will take note of some of the issues that I've raised about accessible pedestrian walkways and streetscapes, as well as the concern about protected bike lanes in what is already a busy intersections up there in that neighborhood. I want to note that there are a number of people who have disabilities who are living in fully accessible units in Buckingham that will benefit from this and being able to go back and forth in the neighborhood. Then I want to reiterate the need for accessible lobby and drive up, pick up space. And I'm looking forward to hearing more and seeing more about the building, and I hope you will seek the advice of the disability community and disability commission, maybe on some technical points about accessibility. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Doris. And I think that wraps us all up. Everyone who's an SPRC member had a chance to talk. No one hiding behind the filter. Okay, so as far as our next steps, I just wanted to thank everybody here who came and shared your thoughts in person or virtually. I think we had a really good discussion, and our next meeting was mentioned March 20th is our save the date for right now.
Public comments?
Yep, we're going to do that, Dr. Byrne. I'm going to get to that. We're going to be talking about sustainability and biophilia, public spaces, community benefits, phasing construction, updates on what we talked about tonight. If you have any questions between now and then, please feel free to email myself and Peter, and we can get those questions to the applicant or answer them ourselves. Thank you to both staff and the applicant for your presentations tonight. Now I would like to go to public comments. I think we only have one person registered, and that is Dr. Byrne. So Dr. Byrne, you have 3 minutes. And please feel free to go off mute, and you can go on camera, and please share your feedback on this project.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
This project does not have enough biophilia. While there are a few small plant beds on the structure, there is no green roof. The structure instead contains much synthetic turf and wood decking, which will create stormwater runoff. Add native vines and other plants that will hang down from the roof and balconies, climb from the ground, or grow from the lawn east of the building. Add a real green roof. This may appear too innovative, but to increase biophilia, set back the building's ground floor from all planned sidewalks. The setbacks will increase the space available on the sidewalk for plantings of low vegetation. The setbacks will also allow the second or third floor to shelter pedestrians during inclement weather. People haven't done this before in Arlington. It's a good idea. All plants should support pollinators. To conform with the county board's monarch pledge, plant much common milkweed, Asclepias syriaca. This plant grows well in Arlington sunny natural areas. Monarchs prefer to lay eggs on this milkweed species. Plant few or no ornamental, wind-pollinated ornamental grasses such as hedges. While the leaves and stems of these plants feed and shelter some pollinators, plants that insect pollinators attract and feed far more. Replace the area that may be designated for above-grade parking with a green space containing native shrubs, ground covers, and perennials that support pollinators. All tree trenches and sidewalks and elsewhere should contain common milkweed and other plants that support pollinators. Increase the size of the public space, a future park, in the northwestern corner of the site. Do not rely on the county's architects to select the plants for the park. They often select the wrong species for the county's parks and don't present them to the public. Lawns are not biophilic. They support few pollinators, birds, and other wildlife. Replace all lawns, including the lawn between Arlington Boulevard Bike Trail and the building, with plantings of native shrubs, ground covers, and perennials that support pollinators. Revise the landscape sheets in the 4.1 submission to identify the species and locations of all shrubs, ground covers, and perennials. The SPRC and the public will need this information when reviewing the landscape plan at the next SPRC meetings and at later public hearings. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Byrne. Okay, and that concludes our meeting. Again, thank you all for coming tonight, and I look forward to seeing you on March 20th, if not earlier, out in town.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.